Hello. It's time for another video in our rune series. And the last one we did was Ansur. So today's is Raido. Oh. There we go. So, Raido is the letter R. And here I've done a slightly larger depiction of it. Now, Raido has a variety of meanings, but its basic symbolism is the wheeled vehicle, the wheelbarrow or the chariot. So it stands also for riding. Raido is for riding. And it represents movement. So going somewhere. And so this can be a literal symbol as a journey, right? But it's also a journey that involves some significance, some importance, right? Riding is hard for horses was one of the sayings associated with one of the poems, the rune poems. So it represents a journey of importance that also represents challenge. And on a symbolic level, it represents a kind of initiation. Now, you'll remember that the previous rune, Ansur, also represented a kind of initiation, you could say. It was the rune of revelation. It was the rune where Odin went onto the tree of Yggdrasil and he impaled himself on it with the magic spear upside down for 3 days until he had the vision of the runes and received the power of the runes. And that's one type of initiatory experience. That's what you could call the internal initiatory experience. And Raido represents the other kind, which is the external initiatory experience. One is going in, the other is going out. The Sufis used to say that a person was not educated until they traveled. And in most initiatory traditions, there is some kind of an element of travel that in olden times would have been a literal thing. You'd have to go on a pilgrimage. You'd have to go to do the Eleusinian mysteries in Greece. You couldn't do it in your house, you know. You'd have to go to a pilgrimage site to receive some kind of a secret initiatory ritual. And so nowadays in symbolic ritual, you see that usually one of the elements of a ritual initiation from a mystery school is that idea of a journey, that the candidate has to go on a symbolic journey. They go around the circle until they find the way in, or things like that, right? And so Raido represents that kind of journey as well. And you can see it emerges out of the Well of Weird, and it goes up all the way to the peak point, you could say, and then it descends out and away, but then it starts to come back towards the middle pillar and then out again. I've kind of exaggerated its direction out, but the idea is that it's moving in a zigzag sort of fashion, right? And I think this is significant first as that symbol of the wheel rotating, right? There are no wheels, there's no circles in the runes, right? They're all lines. But so the R represents that effect of going back and forth, of spiraling, right? If you projected the Raido rune into a third dimension, you could almost see it as a spiral. And it's also significant in the sense that it represents a motion that is a back and forth motion, going and returning, right? You go to the east and then you come back to the west, or vice versa, right? And this is important because of historic elements in the northern pagan tradition. That one of the things they valued as a kind of a trance experience was this kind of ritual shaking practice, right? That they would shake themselves into a trance, going back and forth, seething until they had visions, they had revelatory experiences, this sort of thing. So the Raido in this case could be the other side of the tradition. There was the revelation tradition of Odin, which was what was symbolized by the rune Ansur, and then the Raido tradition, which was a tradition that involved much more of an ecstatic kind of, not revelation but trance, right? And so there's those two sides of it, right? Scrying and ecstasy. And in fact, part of what Raido, if we're looking for Raido words, well, Raido is for rhythm, right? You're making a rhythm, ritual motion that puts you into, be it through spiral movement, spiral dance, or be it through seething and shaking, or be it through a rhythm pattern of some kind that puts you into an altered state of consciousness. And R is for ritual, right? Raido is also for the ritual construct. So it represents that other form of obtaining initiatory wisdom. And both forms are very important. Raido's is one that requires an attention to the external world, and you have to go somewhere, you have to do something, right? A Raido rune could symbolize that you need to take some kind of a magical retirement. Raido is for retirement. That means you separate yourself from your normal environment, you go out somewhere, and you engage in a specific kind of practice, or no practice at all. You avoid taking actions, or you take only very specific actions in order to try to create an effect, to change things. Part of Raido, like part of planning any kind of a journey, demands timing, that you have to be able to do the right thing at the right time and know when to go and when to come back, when to move out and when to draw yourself back into the middle. So there's an element in Raido of being able to understand and know style, right? There's an element in Ansur, Raido's partner there that preceded it, of this one type of symbolism of death and then return, right? This kind of Osirian concept, right? That you have to sacrifice yourself, and then you receive a revelation, and you come back, but you're transformed. You're not what you once were, right? There's another kind of mystery in Raido, which is that the chariot of Raido is also the chariot of the sun that is riding across the heavens, right? And you always see in these particular, Indo-European pagan traditions, this image of the sun being drawn across the skies by a chariot. So the Raido journey is also the journey of the sun in the sky, going all the way across the earth. And it's interesting as a detail that apparently the Raido rune came to be associated once the European pagans started to have interactions with early Christians. It became seen as the Christ rune, right? Not Ansur, where you had Odin crucified on a cross, you're impaled on a tree. It's the equivalent, but rather Raido. And why? Well, for two reasons. One is that solar element, and Christ, the Christ concept is a solar deity concept, right? Whether Christians consciously realize it or not. The earliest form of death and resurrection that the pagan people understood was the sun. The sun would, be born each day and die each night, and then come back. The sun would lose strength in winter and become cold, and then it would regain its power and be born again in the springtime. And so this Osirian concept was very much a solar concept. But there's also a more direct reason, which is that the Raido rune is very similar to the Chai Ro, which was a symbol that looks like this. Just a second here. that's the Chairo there, right, compared to Raido. The Chairo is the symbol that before the cross, for the first few centuries of Christian history, the Chairo was the most common Christian symbol, not the cross. The cross only became popular later in, past the 4th century, from the 4th century onwards. But for many hundreds of years, the Chairo was equally significant as a Christian symbol, equally recognizable. It seems like an odd symbol to us. You might know it if you're Orthodox or if you're a particularly strict kind of Catholic. But most Christians today would look at a Chairo and they wouldn't necessarily know it's a Christian symbol. But in the early Christian period, it was the symbol. And that's because Chi and Rho are 2 Greek letters, and they've been combined there into a kind of sigil that is for Christos, for Christ, right? And so the Chairo's similarity visually to the R rune, to the Raido, was probably part of also of why there was this association, right? So there are all these elements of the journey and of this kind of rebirth of a different sort, not the rebirth of self-sacrifice that you see with Answer, but the rebirth of a transformation, of a radical change that happens in movement, in going, not in being pinned and stuck to a tree, but in going somewhere, and as a result having to shake off and change all of your sense of being. I guess that's it for today.